Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we are going to learn how to use the Godot game development engine to build a very simple video game. We're going to go through it nice and slow. I'm going to explain everything we're doing, and we are going to talk through the process of building a game. Now, if you've never used Godot before, you can download Godot from Godot.com. Let me pull up that website for you so we can see. Actually, it's GodotEngine.org. That's what it's called. So you'd come to this website and click Download Latest. Godot is free, and you do not need to install Godot on your computer. You can run it from a flash drive. You can run it from pretty much anything. Godot runs on Windows or, I believe, Linux or Mac computers. But if you're using a Chromebook or some other browser or some other browser-based operating system, you can run Godot in the browser. All you have to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. And down here under Godot Engine, there's an option for Web Editor. You can click on that. It will open up the browser-based version of the Godot editor. Now, you're probably going to have some performance issues using the browser engine, but it works relatively just as well as the desktop version. For the rest of this series, I will be using the desktop version, so go ahead and download that and get it open. Now, once you open up Godot, you'll see this screen. This is your project screen. I have a lot of projects in Godot because I use it all the time. So you probably won't see any projects in your project screen. You're going to need to create one. So I'm going to go ahead and create one myself. I'm going to click Create. In this menu, we have some options that we have to pay attention to. First, we need to give it a project name. I'm going to call this First Game Ever. And down here, we have our project path. This is the file system in your computer. I'm using Windows, so my root directory is C, and then I'm putting this in my users folder, dstorm, documents, first game ever. Now it's creating a folder for my game files to go into because I have this ticked on. Okay. We can also change this file path if we want by clicking Browse and looking for the folder that we want. We can change the directory. We can go up a folder, or we can click into folders. We can create new folders from here if we'd like. So find a place to store your game files. I would recommend creating a folder with your name on it and putting it somewhere. Sorry about that. It was an announcement. I had to pause. I would recommend creating a folder, putting your name on it, putting all your game projects in that same folder. Then we have to choose our renderer. We have Forward Plus, Mobile, and Compatibility. Forward Plus will give you more advanced graphics. Mobile and Compatibility are less advanced. I'm always going to stick with Mobile for most of the projects in this course. Once we get into 3D, we'll start choosing Forward Plus. All right. And version control, we're not going to worry about using Git in this class. We're just going to handle everything locally. And let's go ahead and click Create. So it's going to take a moment, and it's going to build our project. What it's doing in the background while we're waiting for it to load, and it loaded a lot faster than I expected, but what it was doing in the background was it was building all of those files and folders that are required for this game project to be editable, and it was putting those in our file system in Windows. Okay, so now we have our project open. Here in the middle, this is our main workspace. Now, the workspace by default is a 3D workspace. We don't want a 3D workspace because this first game is going to be a two-dimensional game. So to change our workspace, we have these 5 buttons here. So I'm going to go through what each of these do. The 3D workspace is what we're in right now. Script will allow us to write scripts, which we will talk about that later. Game will allow us to test our game and play it. An asset library will allow us to find assets that we can include in our game. Things like, we'll get into those later. We don't need to confuse things too much. But 2D is what we really want to look at. 2D is a two-dimensional workspace that will allow us to build two-dimensional games. Perfect. Okay, so we have our workspace. Up here we have some controls for the workspace. Right now, by default, I'm using the select mode tool, which is hotkey Q if you would like to get to select mode. We also have move mode, rotate, and scale. These will allow you to manipulate objects in those ways, so you can move, rotate, or scale. I just keep the select mode because it allows me to do all of those things at once. But if you only want to, say, move it or only want to rotate, you can choose these tools. Up here, we have selectable nodes at the position. So if you have a bunch of nodes in one area, we can get a list of selectable nodes. We can pan. We can use a ruler. We can snap objects to a grid. We can turn on the grid. We can change our snapping options here. We can show bones, which that's a more advanced concept you probably don't need to know. And then in here we have some other view options. So this is our workspace. Now notice that it has tabs up here, and our default tab here says it's empty. The reason why is because this workspace is technically displaying something called a scene. Godot is made up of a bunch of different scenes. Right now we have a default scene that has not been saved. We probably should save it. So to manipulate our scene, we come over here to the scene panel, and notice that we have an option to create a root node. Now, the way Godot works is every scene has a hierarchy. There is a root node, which is the parent node of all of the nodes inside that hierarchy, and then everything else is a child of that root node. The root node is going to determine what kind of scene are we building. For example, this is going to be a 2D scene because we're building a 2D level. This is the game we're making is two-dimensional, and we're using this scene as a level. So I'm going to choose 2D scene. Now notice that my scene panel has now changed. I have my node, 2D node right up here at the top. Okay, and this has changed as well. Now it says unsaved and it has this little asterisk. That asterisk means that there have been changes since my previous save, and it's kind of reminding me to save my progress. Let's go ahead and save this scene, but first, actually, I want to change the name of my root node. We can change nodes, or change the name of nodes, just by double-clicking on the node and then typing something else. So I'm going to type game. So that tells me that this is my game. I'm going to go to scene and save scene. This will allow me to save this scene so that I can lock in the changes I've made. Now notice the file type for scene is TSCN. That is the file type for a scene. So, and it's going to take the name that I've given my root node and apply that as my file. Let's go ahead and click save. And now we have our game scene up here in the tab. There's no asterisk because we haven't made any changes since we just previously saved it. And if we look down here to our file system, we can see that we have, in our resources folder, we have a new file called game.tscn. Okay, so this is our actual scene file, and it looks like one of those movie clapboards that you would see at the beginning of a new scene for a movie. That's the icon we have here. Okay, perfect. So now my scene is built. Now let's talk about what this means. Okay, first of all, let's talk about how to move around and manipulate this workspace. So if I want to move my view in a panning fashion, I can either choose the pan tool, or I can click and hold the middle mouse button. That will pan around the scene. Okay? To zoom in and out, I would use the mouse wheel. So I can scroll in and out on the mouse wheel. Okay? Those are really the options you need to be aware of. Zooming in and out, panning. Now I want to focus here on this spot, this little orange icon. That orange icon is the origin of our scene. The origin of our scene. That is the direct center of our scene. And we can see that it's at 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. Now, when I say the direct center of our scene, that doesn't mean that it's the center of the view of our scene. Let me explain. So if I were to play this game, actually, let's do this as an example. Let me bring out some visual element, okay? And I'm going to put that directly in the center of our scene. It's a little bit off. Put it directly in the middle, okay? Now, try to predict what would happen if I viewed this in our game tab so we can see what our game looks like. What I've told you is that this is the direct center of our scene, and that's correct, but it may not look the way you expect. So let's go to Game, and I'm going to click Play. Where did my play button go? Oh, up here. I'm going to click Play. Now, when you play a game for the first time in Godot, it's going to ask you which scene do you want to be the main scene. I'm going to just go ahead and click Select Current because we're only going to have one scene in this game. All right, so here's my game view. What's happening here? Notice that my icon here, I'm only seeing this bottom corner, this bottom right corner. I would expect to see it in the middle of my screen. If 0, 0 is the middle, I would expect it to see in the middle of the screen. But I'm not seeing it there. Here's why. This blue box, which may be hard to see, this is our camera, okay? So our camera is anchored at 0, 0 by the top left corner. So if we look, this box here is showing me what the view will look like when we play the game. If I were to instead move this object over here, place it in the middle of my screen, now when I play the game, I can see it in the middle, okay? So don't get confused about things being at 0, 0, right? That's just the center of the game or of the scene itself. The camera is also anchored at the top left. Now, if we wanted to, we can move the camera over, but we'll just leave it where it is. Okay. Now, let's say I want this to be my player. I want this to actually do something. Okay? I want this to be a main character in my video game. All right. Well, how do we do that? Well, we have some artwork, so we can actually see it, but we probably need to do something that allows this thing to move around in the physical space of my game. For that, we're going to need a special node. So to add a new node to our scene, remember we have our root node here, which is game. We want to add another piece of functionality to this game. We're going to make sure that that root node is selected, and we will click the plus button. That gives us our node menu, which is insanely powerful. This is where we find all of the nodes that we're looking for in this game. And the node that I'm looking for is called Character Body 2D, right there. I'm going to click Create. So then that creates a new node with a Character Body 2D. Okay. Now, this icon and this character body are two separate nodes, and there's no relationship between the two of them. I want this icon to actually be a child of the Character Body 2D node because I want this icon to be attached to this thing that we're going to be moving around. So I'm going to drag this icon and just drop it right on that character body. Now, this Character Body 2D and the icon are associated, and you can see they're associated because of this little line that's linking them together. So now, wherever the Character Body 2D object moves, the icon will follow. One important thing to think about, though, is this icon is now moved away from its origin. So if I were to move the Character Body object, this object, it moves that object as well, but these two aren't in the same space, so that might cause some problems later on. So I'm going to move this Character Body node back to center, and I'll move the icon back to center as well. So how you do that is with the node selected, we can come over here to what's called the Inspector panel. The Inspector panel has all kinds of options and we'll call them preferences that you can change about specific nodes. This option that I'm looking for is actually the transform property. Transform is things like your rotation, your position in the X and Y coordinates, your scale, the skew. There's all kinds of things about position that we can pay attention to. Now I want to reset this object's position, so I can actually just hit this kind of rewind button to reset it back to 0, 0. And I'm going to do the same with my icon here as well. I'm going to go to my transform and reset it back to 0, 0. Okay, now we have a sprite, so we have some artwork attached to our character body 2D. But we have this error here. And the error is saying the node has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. Okay, well, let's talk about how to solve that problem. Right now, what we have is we have an object that has some artwork attached to it, but there's nothing telling it what the boundaries of our artwork are. Now, the boundary is really important because without boundaries, we can't actually collide with other objects. So what we need to do is create something called a collision shape. And then we draw that shape around the object where we want to indicate its collision area. Okay, so we're going to grab another node, which is going to be a child of our character body 2D. I'm going to click this plus icon. And I'm going to look for a collision shape 2D. There we go. And create. So now we have two children attached to our character body. We have collision shape and our icon. But we still have an error. And that error is because we have a collision shape, but we haven't told our icon here what shape we want our collision to be. To do that, we want to come over here to shape and click this drop down here and choose one of these options. So there are all different kinds of shapes we can use. The one we're going for is a rectangle because our icon is a rectangle. And now I want to zoom in and notice I have these 9 dots here. These 9 dots will allow me to shape and adjust this collision shape so I can draw the boundaries. Let me grab my select tool again. And if I click these and drag, notice that I'm creating a new boundary. I'm going to make sure that that boundary is as close to the edges of my artwork as possible. Okay, perfect. Now, if this collider interacts with another collider in my game, then they will collide with one another and they can't pass through. Okay, so now I have an object that can move. I have artwork. I have a collision. The last thing I need to get this object to do something in the game is I need to write a script. A script is basically lines of code that tell an object in the video game how it needs to behave. Okay. Luckily, adding a script to an object is incredibly easy in Godot. Right here, I'm going to have my character body 2D node selected, and I'm going to click this plus icon up here with this like scroll looking piece of paper. I'm going to click that. And what this is going to do is attach a node script, or better said, attach a script to the node. Okay. Alrighty. Now, one thing I want to make sure I keep checked is this template. We don't want to write all the code ourselves for this first project. We're just learning. So we're going to let Godot give us some code that already works, and we're going to kind of just let them program our game for us for now. Okay, so make sure this is checked on. We will definitely be writing our own scripts going forward, but just for this example, we can use some code that they've already written. I'm going to click Create. And here's the code that they've already given us. It's a good thing we don't have to write this ourselves. We will learn what all of this means in another lesson, but for now, we'll just leave it alone. Okay, let's go back to our 2D view. And let's put our character somewhere we want it to go. I'm going to choose my move tool and I'll put it, I don't know, let's put it right about here. And let's play our game and find out what happens. Well, first I want to save my scene. So I'm going to save. Now I'm going to play my game. Oh no, What just happened? Well, now this object has physical properties, right? It has a weight. It has gravity being applied to it. It has all kinds of things to make it actually move in a video game like something would move in a video game. The problem is it just keeps falling, and it falls past the boundary of my screen, and it just keeps going forever. Well, we want to stop that. Let's build a platform. Now, this platform is not going to have any graphics attached to it. It's just going to be an invisible object, but when our character hits it, we'll be able to actually use that as a platform to jump around and move and test our character moving around in the game. So, to add a platform, we're going to come up here to our root node, and we're going to add a new node to this root node. And the node we're looking for is something called a static body 2D. A static body 2D is an object that just stays where it is, just stays put, it doesn't move. Okay? We can add a collider to this thing so that whenever our player's collider collides with this thing's collider, then they don't move past each other. So let's do that. Let's add a collision shape 2D to this static body 2D. One helpful tip, when you're in this node menu, you can find previously used nodes and very easily just click on it and bring that in. Okay. Now, the node shape that I'm going to use for this one is going to be a world boundary shape. What that's going to do is it's going to allow me to set a world boundary for this object. So I'm going to move it roughly here. And this up arrow is showing me which direction I'm allowed to travel. Okay. So now for infinity on either side of this point, we will always have a boundary. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click play and see what happens now. Oh, perfect. So now my character stopped right where that world boundary is, and that's because my character has a collider. I can also move my character because I have a script attached to my character. Okay, and I can jump by hitting the space bar. Now, I can't jump very high, and I can't move very fast. So to make changes to this character's movement, I could come over here and look, and I don't really see any options. That's because the speed of my character's movement and the height of my character's jump are inside the script. So I'd have to come in here and I'd have to find some numbers that might change how fast I'm moving. I'll let you take a look at the script and see if you can figure out which numbers to change. The other thing that I might want to do is maybe I want to add a boundary. Let me go back to our 2D. Maybe I want to add a boundary so that I can't actually leave the edges of the screen. Okay, because now my character's gone. So maybe I want to add a boundary here and a boundary here. I'll let you think about how you might be able to add those boundaries in. But for now, this is a pretty good place for us to stop. We've built a new world. We've built a character that can move and jump. And we've built some boundaries to keep our characters from leaving the screen. Okay? In the next project, we're going to build a brand new game from the ground up. We're going to build a maze game. A game that allows your player to go through a maze, and if they touch the edges, they touch the sides, game over, right? So we're going to go through the maze game project step by step as a group. Hopefully this wasn't too confusing. Hopefully this little lesson got you a little bit more excited about game development, and I'll see you in the next project. Okay, bye.